Obviously, you're one of the newest members of the Red Sox organization as of December when you signed as a free agent. Was that something that kind of drew you towards Boston? Was the familiarity with some of these, with the Kyles of the world and maybe the Ocharts, things like that, or what I guess drew you to the Red Sox?
Yeah, I mean, there's kind of a lot of different avenues that I would say that were drawing me to Boston. I grew up in Southern California, about as far away from Boston as you can get, but I grew up an Angels fan. But for some reason, the Red Sox were always like my far away team that I would follow and really kind of fell in love with from afar. And I think maybe some of that had to do with, yeah, I was big playing MLB The Show when I was a kid. I remember playing MLB '06 The Show with David Ortiz on the cover. And that Red Sox team was stacked. Like, you'd play with the All-Star team in that game and half the team is Red Sox. So maybe that's where it started. And I just kind of fell in love from afar. And then my dad actually surprised me on my 11th birthday, pulled me out of school, didn't tell me where we were going. And we just hopped on a flight to Boston to watch the Angels play at Fenway. And we were there for like 24 hours, just like a quick trip. But we went and like walked around Boston, got a tour of Fenway Park, like went and sat in a bunch of different seats at Fenway during the game. And it was like the coolest experience of my life. And, it always has held kind of a strong place in my heart since then, since I was 11 years old. And then, as I get older and I start my professional career and stuff, I create this relationship with Kyle Bodie. And he makes his way over to Boston. And just kind of seeing from afar, like the shift in how they go about developing pitching. I hear things from Bodie. I hear things from other guys that have played with the Red Sox organization over the last couple of years. Just felt like it was right up my alley in terms of, philosophy, development, stuff like that. So when I hit free agency, I kind of always was thinking Boston, like if I had to pick one place, like sight unseen, Boston. And they didn't reach out right away. I was talking to some other teams, didn't really know that was going to happen. And then they just kind of came into the fold and, my eyes kind of lit up when I see that text from my agent or whatever that they're interested. And then I was almost wary of looking for red flags, in like our interview process and stuff like that. Cause I knew I really wanted to go there in my heart, but I was wary of jumping the gun a little bit. And everything that I heard in our, meetings, meeting with Justin Willard, the kind of the pitching head over there, and it was checking all the boxes. And then like they came through with their offer, and their offer was better than all the offers. And it just kind of felt like it was meant to be. So I'm still kind of pinching myself, honestly, at this point. I just feel very lucky to have this opportunity. And I feel incredibly grateful to be a part of an organization with so much history and such a winning culture.
So you kind of hit on a little bit of, obviously the relationship with Kyle was already there, and you had heard things from some other guys about, what they do with their pitching development and guys they've worked with before. For you being a pitcher, did it sway you at all just having, with Craig Breslow being in charge of, the operations with the Red Sox and being a former pitcher, and he's been on the mound before, he's been in a clubhouse before. Does that give you any sense of like feeling of comfort, just knowing that this guy's been there before? He knows like what it's like to be on the mound. He knows about struggling in the major leagues. He knows all that. Does that move you at all?
Yeah, absolutely. I think kind of the discussion in baseball over the last few years has been, with these analytical minds kind of making their way into the fold, and a lot of decisions being made using analytics and modern data, stuff like that. You kind of have seen the pendulum swift from full analytics back to kind of finding characters in the game that can bridge that gap between having been there before, what it feels like to be in a clubhouse, what it feels like to create a solid team culture, and just be able to kind of get into the head of guys who have struggled, like what does that feel like mentally? And it does bring some confidence to know that, someone like Breslow has been there and done that. And he's also up to date with everything on the analytical front. I think that I think his resume is kind of the perfect resume for someone you'd want in that position. So that was definitely appealing to me. And he reached out and sent me a text, as we were getting close to kind of finalizing a deal. And I really liked that personal touch. And, I've only heard great things about him and how he operates. So, yeah, it definitely brings comfort knowing that the guy in charge has been in your shoes.
Yeah,
That's actually interesting. You said that too, because um, I'm sure you're well aware that the fan base in Boston is extremely passionate about the baseball team and transactions, and I mean, you name it. To kind of hear a player though, kind of talk about like what you're saying in regards to, you know, with Breslow, that just like little personal touch at the end, where I think sometimes fans kind of disconnect. They just kind of see everything so transactional. This is the player, this is the contract, boom, you move on. It's kind of nice to hear a player put a little personal touch to Breslow, because it does sometimes he comes across as that almost robotic, in his approach and how he sounds, and it's just always the same thing that is there. So it is kind of a little refreshing to kind of hear that, and I'm hopeful that when fans do listen to the show and they kind of hear that, they are making connections outside of just, hey, you know what, we have a good pitching program now, and this is what we're offering, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, there's always going to be a difference between that kind of forward face that you have to put out when you're in a position like that, especially with such a passionate fan base like Boston. You want transparency, but you also know that there are a lot of things working behind the scenes. So, yeah, there's definitely more than meets the eye in terms of, the fan perspective and like kind of the inside baseball perspective. And that's something that, I've thought about and talked about a lot. I was actually just having a conversation with my wife about this yesterday. Like the perspective that you have when you're a fan, like when you're a kid growing up, I would look and I remember rooting for the Angels and being like, oh, they just traded my favorite player. Like, why would they do that? Like stuff like that. And then you kind of get into baseball and you understand all the ins and outs of like contracts, the business side. It gets a little bit messy, but there's a reason for everything that's going on. And, I have pretty strong faith. And in my understanding, it seems like the Red Sox have been doing a great job on that front. And I mean, yeah, the perspective can be a little bit different, but I feel like I have a good understanding of how that stuff all works.